All right. Every time I try to do this, I think I'd have to do it twice because I'm still learning this software. So here we go again. Round two. I'm Dr. And this is another installment of Why Don't Politicians Have Any Integrity? Or why can't they answer a question, I should say. And I want to make this quick. I've got it queued up like a professional might. And we are going to talk through a short interview that had Tim Walz involved here when he was on Meet the Press. Okay. Actually, I want to try that again. You know what it is about this is I just am not technologically advanced. All right, here we go. Share screen, share screen. Okay, the audio is on. That's why I wanted to make sure. And I'm going to add it. And there we go. And we're going to play now. Here we go.
Secure our border, but do it with dignity and respect to the American
Question.
tradition of respecting immigrants and refugees as a beacon of hope.
They're asking him about the immigration crackdown that Trump's doing here. He stopped immigration from several different places, if not all of them, for the time being, because he said we have too many immigrants right now, essentially.
Well, speaking of the Somali community, President Trump is targeting them and your state in part. He's citing fraud as the reason for his crackdown. Dozens of people of East African descent have been charged, convicted, and sentenced for stealing more than $1 billion in taxpayer money from government programs during COVID. As you know, Governor, that is more than Minnesota spends each year to run its Department of Corrections. So I want to give you a chance to respond to this. Do you take responsibility for failing to stop this fraud in your state?
Okay, so if you don't know the story, there were apparently billions of dollars stolen by Somalian groups. There were other groups involved too. Apparently, it wasn't just them, and there were some in DHS that said people were stealing out of the cookie jar, and they just kept refilling it like there was no problem. And so there are claims that it went all the way to the top. And so Tim Walz is the top of Minnesota, being the governor, and I think he's running again. At least that's what I recall. And a normal person would answer this question as, yeah, we should have caught that sooner. It was really bad that we wasted all these taxpayer dollars. We have prosecuted several of those groups, and we are taking care of it. But I do take responsibility because I'm a leader and the buck stops with me, all that kind of stuff that politicians and leaders say. And here's his response. But look at his confused look on his face. I want to point that out here. One moment when they go to him. Look at that. Like his eyes were shifting. He can't believe he just got asked that question, is what I would wager.
Well, certainly I take responsibility for putting people in jail. Governors don't get to just talk theoretically.
The only thing he takes responsibility for is putting people in jail. But I didn't think governors were prosecutors, nor did I think they were judges, nor did I think they were juries, nor did I think they were police officers. I thought they were the executive of their particular state. What is he talking about? He put them in jail. But he's just looking for anything he can do to say, I'm wonderful, and then he's going to turn it on Trump. And I'm not trying to be political in the sense that I'm taking a position. I just want to highlight how these folks talk. And there are Republicans that do this too. I need to pick one of those next for these kind of things.
Theoretically, we have to solve problems. And I will note, it's not just Somalis. Minnesota is a generous state.
It's not just Somalis. Minnesota is a generous state. What?
Minnesota is a prosperous state, a well-run state where AAA bond.
What is he talking about?
But that attracts criminals. Those people are going to.
Being generous and bonded attacks criminals. What if you were generous with integrity and generous with checks and balances and generous with keeping your eye on the money more closely? Have some integrity. Just take responsibility for your actions.
To jail. We're doing everything we can, but to demonize an entire community on the actions of a few, it's lazy.
Okay, that's a legitimate argument. But is he taking any responsibility? I just don't
And as
understand.
you heard Senator Kelly say, this president has cut a lot of inspector generals. He's cut programs that
He's quoting the person that just, okay, I don't want to get into
could
that.
help us tackle this on. So we'll take it on. We'll put folks in jail. I don't care what your nationality is. I don't care what your religion is, your color. If you're committing crimes, these are programs that were meant to serve students with autism, to housing, and to making sure people.
Okay, that's great. But the money went, in the billions, went to people who were not in need of that particular money. Do you take responsibility for the misuse of funds?
There's a reason
She's not
Minnesota
following
ranks as the
up.
top, lowest childhood poverty, best place for children to live.
Yeah.
People are taking advantage of that. They're going to prison. That is totally disconnected with demonizing an entire group of people who came here fleeing civil war and created a vibrant community that makes Minnesota and this country better. But that's Donald Trump. Deflect, demonize, come up with no solution.
It's defect, demonize, come up with no solutions. It's legitimately what he just did. He just did that. He said, well, I'll take responsibility for the good stuff. I'm not going to take responsibility for the bad stuff. And it's all Donald Trump's fault. He deflected, he demonized, and he didn't take any responsibility.
Fix anything on fraud. My God, there's a big difference between fraud and corruption. And corruption is something he knows about.
Well, Governor,
there's a difference between corruption and fraud. But when you let the fraud go on and they report that you let the fraud go on and you don't do anything about it, it feels like a one hand washing the other situation.
Governor, let me have you weigh in on this, because part of your initial response.
Okay, that's the end of that one. That's all I really wanted to say about that. It's one of those things where it's just like, for the love of Pete, brother, just take responsibility and move on. You'll be further along and more people will like you and admire you because you'll have integrity and they just will not do it. They want power. They want status. They want control. And you see this in leadership, in businesses, nonprofits. You see it in businesses that are for profits. You see it in churches and ministries when people get their ideals, when they get their purpose, when they get their motivation out of whack, they do this kind of stuff. And then they refuse to take blame when it's something they should have handled differently. Lord help us all. May you, folks the small group that'll get to watch this, we're growing, we're working at it. May you seek to be more Christ-like, to develop personal integrity, to refine your soul in sanctification to be more like Christ. May you always take responsibility for your actions even when it's hard. May you swallow your pride and do the right thing and lead well.